Hi, this is Andrea. Following two incredible seasons, I'm now back with season 3 of the Neurodiverse Voices podcast. If you're listening or watching for the first time, I am the mother to a beautiful autistic daughter with whom I learn a whole lot every day. This has been my motivation to found and host the Neurodiverse Voices podcast. So join me and my guests in this mission to raise awareness and increase understanding. Together, let's make this world one that embraces and accepts difference. Welcome to the Neurodiverse Voices podcast. Hi, everyone. Today I bring you another special guest. I'm meeting her in person for the first time, and it's been amazing already. She's neurodivergent. She's the mom to neurodivergent children, and she's also a mindfulness expert and has recently completed a master's of mindfulness-based cognitive therapy at the University of Oxford. Please welcome Susan Liverman. Hi, Susan.
Hi, Andrea. Hi, it's so nice to be here, and thank you for that very generous introduction and calling me an expert. I definitely would not call myself an expert, but nevertheless, I'm really happy to be here. So yeah, looking forward to chatting.
Thank you. I'm sure you're a lot more of an expert in mindfulness than myself. So I'm very excited to hear all about it during our interview. So I think we should start by your journey. What has brought you here as a neurodivergent adult and a parent as well, and how did neurodivergence shape your life experience so far?
Yes, excellent. We'll begin. So I think as a late diagnosed neurodivergent person, so that's the diagnosis of autism and ADHD, perhaps my journey to that recognition of that is perhaps familiar to people in similar positions, in that came about through the experiences of my young people and their experiences, and recognizing their neurodivergence, and in recognizing that, sort of seeing myself and my own traits and realizing that was kind of, oh, they're just like me. And so realizing that and recognizing it. And I don't think that's particularly uncommon. I think that's quite a common experience. And for me, it's been a helpful one, because it's not like I was in my sort of early 40s when I was diagnosed, but it's not like I just recognized that neurodivergence and then just thought, oh yes, I'm autistic and ADHD. And there was no run up to that. You know, if I look back at the history of my life, there's been periods of struggle and there's been periods of like difficulty, which were not well supported and which were unhealthy and not and didn't result in good outcomes for me. Say around my like 20s and that sort of period of life. And so actually, like the recognition of neurodivergence and also crucially how to support it. Mm-hmm. It's not just saying, oh, I'm neurodivergent, I'm autistic, I'm ADHD, that's it. It's almost like that's the start, because that's like, okay, so how do I live like this? What needs supporting? What needs do I have? And how can I support them? And actually for me, that has been absolutely crucial in living my life in sort of healthier ways. And
that's more, very important for you to be able to thrive and not just survive. And as you said, it's not uncommon at all. There's many of us, and I'm saying us because I'm included myself in that. I'm finding more and more traits of neurodivergence within myself, so I do relate, and I think it's just very important that you do understand yourself. And it's great that we have this awareness, and things are advancing in a way that we can actually support our children and young people, and most importantly, ourselves as parents, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. It's both. It's not just about ourselves. It's about our families. It's about our children. It's about who we are in the world and what we do. Understanding yourself and operating life in that way, if you like. For me, that can only be a benefit to like both myself individually, but also to society as well, I think.
Yeah. So what has led you to mindfulness? I know that you started being interested and practicing it since 2008. So that's quite a long time.
Yeah, 2008. So what led me to mindfulness? Well, so I've always been interested in psychology and self-help and positive psychology. I kind of was a little bit of an unusual child. My dad's a psychotherapist, and he sort of studied late into his life, and he had all these psychology books. So I was kind of like 10 and reading all these like psychology books and stuff, and I've always had that interest. And actually I was typing up my dad's PhD, and he had lots and lots of books sort of lying around, and one of them was a book called Full Catastrophe Living by Jon Kabat-Zinn. So I'm a massive reader, so I picked up this book. It's a huge doorstep. It's a fantastic book. It literally sort of changed my life. But I picked it up and I started reading it, and then I was like, "Oh, Dad, can I read this?" And that kind of got snaffled away, and I hit that book. And in the book, there was just this line, and it stayed with me to this day, and I sort of say it quite a lot, but it was basically along the lines of Jon Kabat-Zinn writing, "As long as you're breathing, there's more right with you than wrong with you." And it was just like this moment of like, oh, wow. Because actually, if you're someone, and I was someone that was like reading a lot of self-help books and things like that, they're actually, most of them are actually just quite deficit based, aren't they? Because they're like, well, you're here and you want to be here, and this is this gap, and it's good, you want to like improve. And I was a reader and a self-improver and things like that. And yeah, but to read that, I was like, And then there was obviously lots of other stuff about mindfulness, but that was just like almost like this sort of acceptance that this wasn't about kind of changing who you are, that just felt really welcoming, and it felt like sort of coming home to something. And at that time, I wouldn't have had the word neurodivergence in my vocabulary. I wouldn't even have had autism or ADHD in my vocabulary. But I think that constant interest in self-help and things like that was actually coming from a sort of similar place of trying to understand who am I and how do I fit into this world, if that makes sense. So yeah, for me, it was just like this recognition that like feeling safe in, whatever this mindfulness malarkey is that I'm reading about. It's like, oh, okay, so I'm okay here. So yeah, that just kind of sparked
the interest. And often mindfulness is associated with relaxation, but you do use it as a tool for emotional awareness and self-help. How has that been for you, and can you maybe tell us a bit more between the difference?
Yeah, definitely. So I mean, it's so interesting actually. So when I was reading that book back in 2008, mindfulness was kind of it wasn't new, though the interventions have been around for a couple of years, a few years, but I guess it hadn't hit the media in the way that it has now. So there wasn't like a massive awareness of like mindfulness. People weren't really using the term in like sort of daily lexicon. I think now, sort of 17 years later, mindfulness is everywhere. Everyone's like, oh, be mindful, be, mindful this. And it doesn't necessarily mean like a single thing. And it's kind of not as related to that sort of original meaning, which in the sense of like mindfulness-based stress reduction, which was that first book that I read, and then very similar to mindfulness-based cognitive therapy, which I did the master's in, that has a very specific meaning, which is, there's a few different ways of saying it, but essentially paying attention to the present moment with non-judgmental awareness, and with a sense of curiosity and kindness. There's different variations of that, but that's fundamentally what it is. So when I talk about mindfulness, that's kind of what I'm talking about, is that awareness. In terms of like relaxation responses and things like that, that might happen, because actually the mind wandering, which is something that we work with in mindfulness and those sort of approaches to bring the mind back. But the mind wandering is very tiring. So actually, I do notice that new participants do find this relaxation response, because it's almost like it's this chance for like the attention to rest. But that isn't the kind of goal of MBCT. So if you don't relax, you haven't failed. Actually, it's the bringing the awareness to the moment. It's that action, if that makes sense. And so for me, I think I do that. I use that mindfulness, or I am that mindfulness, whatever the right way is, or I'm embodying it. But I don't know what effect it will kind of have. But when I look back over the last 16, 17 years, I sort of think the way that it's personally helped me has been through recognizing emotions, recognizing how I feel, and then being able to respond to those emotions helpfully. And so that for me, that's where it comes back to, like, I will talk a lot about emotional regulation, but I think for other people, everyone's moments are different, right? So what you're bringing your attention to is going to be different. So other people might find different effects. Other people might find more focus, or, infinite varieties of outcomes. But that's certainly for me, and certainly as someone that I didn't necessarily really have too much awareness of my body. Just felt I just didn't really pay attention to my body. And now I'm someone that has a very close awareness of like sensations in my body and like what's happening, and being able to describe them. And I think that mindful awareness has been the link to that, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I relate with that. I think I've only just now started having that understanding of my physical needs and sensory needs. Is there any practical example that you can give where you apply mindfulness, for example, into your parenting?
Yeah, I mean, it's different. I guess it's different needs at different times, or different applications at different times. So like in general day-to-day life, I guess if I'm in a bit of a activated situation, say with like one of my young people, kind of there's like some conflict, then it just might be some awareness that there's conflict, and I'm starting to feel my dysregulation, and that actually might mean pausing the conversation or something like that, rather than just I'm the parent, I'm going to kind of,
Control the situation.
It might just be, and it's different. It will be different at different ages. Like my young people are older, so it's very different than if they were kind of like young toddlers. I need the regular connection to regular practice as a sort of baseline connection to myself, if that makes sense. So it's not about ticking a box of like a set number of minutes, but I definitely find that if I don't practice, then I can start to get a bit into my head and a bit frazzled. So the regular connection to practice I think that just helps me with parenting generally. And then in particularly difficult times, where there's been times of, without going into details, but like times of like, say, crisis, then actually it's not been as much around the sort of daily practice, because you're kind of living in a sort of quite a different situation. It's very much been, the assistance has been in me being able to label how I'm feeling. And even if that's like just tiredness, or I'm feeling frustrated, and then actually just naming that has just been enough, just to give myself enough grace to like not snap, to not react. So yeah, different helps at different times, I think.
Yeah. So it's very important that we recognize and we are aware of what we are feeling. So that's a good way to start, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
And many of us neurodivergents or parents of neurodivergent children, we face burnouts and emotional exhaustion. So what insights did you gain from your experience with mindfulness and supporting parents with their mental health?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I have different experiences. So I have my own experience of burnout, where I was in a burnout following a period of intensity, parenting intensity, of mental health. And following this sort of immediacy of that situation, I went into a period of just burnout where, it was just, I had some time off work, and I didn't feel like I was in a kind of mental crisis, but there was just no resources left. I just had like nothing. And during that period, it was just more about rest. I wasn't really thinking about mindfulness or feeling mindfulness as such. And actually, in fact, I kind of let it go. And I sort of felt that, like, looking back, it was an act of kindness, because if I'd started kind of talking to myself about why I wasn't practicing, I think that would have been quite a negative thing to do. It was about resting and recovering. In terms of like supporting other parents, so I am a moderator in a large sort of social media group, supporting parents whose children are kind of not or having difficulty attending school. And for me, in those circumstances, and sometimes mental health comes up. In fact, it comes up quite a lot. There's a lot of self-blame. There's a lot of why am I not coping, and why is this happening, and things like that. And for me, it's not, in that circumstance, it's not about me kind of as a moderator or someone replying to someone. It's not about me talking about mindfulness. It's about me supporting that person and what they need. So actually that person might need some practical signposting, because you can kind of see in their post that a lot of their difficulty is coming from not knowing where to get some practical support. Or the person has practical support, but they're just feeling still so difficult. And then it might be signposting some mental health resources, but it also might be about validating like how they feel and saying, I've been there too. And like, you know, I can't speak for you. I'm not saying that our experience is the same, but also just to acknowledge that this is a really difficult situation. And you are not failing by feeling this way. This is like, and often I will talk about kind of my own experience briefly. So yeah, for me, it's kind of, in that case, I think mindfulness supports me to show up for someone else rather than me. I literally never really ever reply to anyone and say, you should try mindfulness. And actually that's a bit of there is a bit of negativity, I think, especially in sort of, where parents have been maybe offered mindfulness instead of some sort of support, or any kind of intervention instead of the support that they're looking for. But I just wouldn't do it anyway, because it's just like, you know, it's like giving advice. If it's unwanted advice, then, you know, it doesn't always land.
It doesn't hurt.
Yeah, but it helps me be there for someone, or sort of recognize someone else's pain and respond to them, I think. Yeah.
And that actually leads me to the next question, which is what are the common misconceptions about mindfulness and the challenges with the neurodivergent and SEND communities?
Yeah.
So I guess that's their understanding that it's it doesn't work, or it might not work, or is not.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. I mean, I guess like a common misconception might be that it's relaxation. I think maybe there could be a perception, and I'm not going to say it's a misconception, but there could be a perception that if you're offered mindfulness, that we're saying the problem's in you. And so like if you fix how you're responding to the situation, this will be fine. And for me, that's not my approach at all. Like, if I'm offering, if someone's interested in talking to me about kind of mindfulness skills, then I'm sharing how it's helped me. I'm talking about some of the practicalities. And I'm also acknowledging that the situation that you're in is very difficult. And in a lot of cases, there should be more support for you. And I think it's holding that both of those things can be true, that like, if it's the right time for you, if your child's in crisis, probably not. You probably don't want to learn a new intervention at that sort of time. But if things are a bit more stable and perhaps you're sort of needing some additional support, then that might be the kind of right time to think about yourself and your own needs. So yeah, I lost my train of thought slightly.
Yeah, that's fine. Well, I guess the next question, it's again, it's related. So how do you see mindfulness helping people engage with the different or the difficult systems that we have without becoming overwhelmed and losing hope?
Yeah, that's a great question. Again, like speaking for myself, having like a clear awareness and a clear seeing has helped me sometimes contextualize, if I can say that, the bigger picture of the system in which we're operating. So if, for example, I'm trying to navigate obtaining some support by an educational health plan, and it's quite difficult, then I can kind of see the wider context of like, without getting too political, but like funding, and you can kind of start realizing why certain individuals within the system might be acting in certain ways, because you can sort of see the context of things. What I would say though is that, you know, if you have a difficult interaction with someone in the system, it doesn't take away the feeling of that. And I think mindfulness, all those sort of emotional regulation skills, have just helped me recognize the feeling. And sometimes that feeling just needs to be held and validated and processed and then passing through. But I guess, again, that sort of emotional awareness skill, or whatever you want to call it, has enabled me to feel it. You know, do the thing, do the crying, do the journaling, do that. I'm so angry, and feel that. And then, and you might have to do that multiple times. This is not like a simple thing. And also kind of navigate those systems, and also like recognizing that you don't do it on your own. You know, people helped me when I was in a low ebb, and you know, you don't know what you're doing for these systems in the first time, and like, you know, who to ask, where to go. And there's just so much like peer support, and like there's so much non-judgment among a fellow parent who's been through it. Like, you know,
sometimes it's to find that first, the strength and the bravery to actually get out there.
Yeah. And I think, you know, if a parent is in a similar situation to you or has been there, they are very unlikely
to judge
or give you advice, or they might give you some practical advice, but they're not going to go, oh, have you tried some unhelpful thing that you tried? You know, that was the first thing that you did. And, you know, they're very likely to go, they're just likely to just sort of hold you and sort of nod and go, you know. And then, you know, there can be humor in it as well. Like, parents are like, you know, you're sending memes and like, you're like sort of laughing about some of the situations, and actually like it helps, you know, because it's like this community, and that's kind of the case for kind of supporting other parents in not finding school, but in other groups where I'm not a moderator, or I'm just a member as a parent, and I just have met some brilliant people and just found that support, and it's a wonderful thing, actually. Definitely.
That's my favorite part of this phase of my journey, actually. I think that's very important, because I was that person not wanting to go out and not being brave enough, and from the moment I've done that, I feel like I'm experiencing a whole new world and meeting some amazing people who are there for each other without judgment, without an agenda, and that's definitely the best part of it.
I think you're right. I totally agree.
So you've also campaigned to raise awareness of SEND issues. I know one of them being attendance in schools.
Yes.
How do you balance your advocacy and self-care and emotional regulation? Because with some of these, it can be quite challenging.
I did have a wry smile when I read the question before the interview, and I was like, I think advocacy is and campaigning is sort of, I think it can be burnout central for a lot of people, because it's like it can feel like a bit of a fight. It can be very tiring and taxing on the nervous system, because you can kind of get quite activated. Especially when I was like first started getting into the world of sort of campaigning, I've got a large petition. I work with I've got a petition partner, another parent, and working together, and looking to sort of get support for the petition and work with our MPs and things like that. And you're trying to reach out to people people in politics and things like that, and you're trying to explain to them like situations, and you're trying to be heard, and that can feel quite what's the word? It can feel quite tiring. I think I definitely probably had periods where I was quite boring because, like, if you got me at the wrong time at a party, I'd probably chew your ear off for about 2 hours. I think time has helped with that. It's definitely helped me regulate. It's a long, I think I thought when when I thought, saw this sort of gap with like attendance fines and that some people were being unfairly fined because they're not intended to be aimed at people whose children can't attend school. I thought, this is just like a bit of an admin error. Like, this is a process issue. I really like process, by the way. I love how things work.
Me too.
So I was like, there's a bit of a process issue here, but you could just fix that. So naive. And anyway, 4 years later, the petition still goes and is very much still needed, and there's obviously lots of people working in that space and doing brilliant things. It's never just about like one organisation or one petition. It's about sort of voices and people, and actually organisations that do far more than I've ever done to sort of raise awareness.
Mm-hmm.
But like time has tempered the kind of the sort of raw immediacy and that sort of activation of my nervous system. I'm like, it must be now. And it's like, okay, like, what are we doing? And sort of trying to channel that energy into positive actions. So something that we're doing at the moment, we're looking to do is, if a parent's fined under a certain, or prosecuted under a certain law, section 444, I think it is, they're very limited defences. But what we're starting to see is that even though there's limited defences or limited reasons for defence, there's some parents with sort of children that were mentally unwell and couldn't attend are starting to be found not guilty. And so we're just working on a sort of, to say a small initiative. I probably shouldn't say it's small.
It's probably not small at all.
Really big. But hopefully with Not Fine in School, we'll gather some of those, or put out a survey and gather some of those case law examples, and then that could actually help future parents.
Yeah, that's really good to see.
In that situation, to either drop the prosecution or it could be used in case preparation. And that's something where, you can just get involved, do something a bit practical until hopefully the process is improved. And the kind of 10% of people that fall down this kind of crack of getting fined or prosecuted, hopefully they can close that gap. So
yeah, well, that's amazing to see. And what changes in the system would you like to see in terms of mental health, well-being, and in support of neurodivergent individuals and families?
Yeah. So I'd like to see, I think, that the focus is more on early support and early recognition.
Prevention.
Yeah, prevention. Because actually, so if we break autism down, if you like, because autism is a spectrum, so there's going to be really different presentations of autistic people. But say like one of the traits of autism is like sensory processing differences. A lot of children go into kind of the school environment. They might have been okay in a nursery environment. They go into school, and then actually as you go further into primary school, the environment starts becoming like more and more rigid. So there's less outdoor time. There's more sort of bottom on seat time and things like that. And you can sort of see that in the EHCP applications. You can see in the I think most applications for an EHCP are between the age of 5 and 10. So that's where things start becoming recognisable that the child's got sort of differences. And I think that's because, like, in an environment, as a human, a child is just a young person. We all try and meet our needs within an environment. That's just fundamentally what humans do. We'll try and meet our needs. And when we can't, that's when we start getting layers of either getting told off because you try, something's not comfortable. So you're probably, maybe you're throwing something because you can't even name it because you're like 6. And so you don't know that, you can't sit still because your core muscle strength hasn't developed. So you're fidgeting, and then you're getting told off not to fidget. And then you start feeling a bit sad because your peers, they seem to be able to do what you can't. And then you start having trouble. Maybe you're dyslexic, but everyone else is writing really easily. And then you start getting these layers of like, because children are very conscious of their peers and what they're doing. And then you start getting these layers of self-esteem and then mental health. And I sort of think, actually, talking to kind of I'm a massive fan of occupational therapists and the work they do, and educational psychologists. And actually, I think if there was just a bit more, I wouldn't say screening, that sounds a bit formal, but if there was a little bit, a bit more recognition of sort of some differences that were showing up in, even reception age children and things like that. Or if, in a simple level, like you can design classrooms that in a way that they're sort of more sensory friendly. Like I was talking to an occupational therapist and they were sort of talking about that the lighting in classrooms can just be a nightmare for some children, and actually blinds would just be like just a really simple solution. And also having clearer walls, because like for some children it's just like so overwhelming just to have all this information. And I just think actually, like, there's so many kind of knowledgeable professionals, parents, the young people themselves. I just can't help thinking of like, if there was some sort of working together and working some stuff out, you could sort of do a lot of preventative work. And, and also just looking at that environment and thinking, well, and I know there's like a lot of talk about mobile phones and social media, and, no doubt they play a role. But we've got to start looking at the environment that our children are in the most of their day, Monday to Friday, and go, okay, what's going on in there? And it's not just the environment, it's also like pressure of exams, and, there's far less time for sport and theatre and things like that. And I do look back on kind of my own primary school life and think, gosh, I think I might have struggled quite a lot. So it's quite interesting. But that is not at all to blame teachers, or there are just some amazing people out there doing brilliant things. And I just think if you sort of, galvanise and just, work together, I think there's some practical things that you can implement.
It's more the system itself. Yes. You mentioned that you like process. I'm exactly the same. And one of the things I find really challenging navigating and knowing stories of other parents is the lack of consistency in the system.
Yeah.
It feels like some people get a lottery ticket and are lucky. I feel like we are one of those families because we had the right people by our side.
Yeah.
But it's not really fair. So there should be more more standardized approach to embrace the needs of everyone. Of course, each case is going to be unique, but it doesn't seem to be fair at this point. And one of the things, I don't know if you would agree with this, but one of the things I think would make things a lot easier is potentially each school having an occupational therapist, a speech and language therapist, a mental health awareness, either a first aider or a mental health nurse, even for the children they could just drop in and go and speak to someone.
Yeah. I mean, the power of connection to a safe person, that's what we need. It's
a
human.
Exactly.
This is a fundamental human need. And to have, I think because it was such an unknown to me, the area of sort of the occupational therapy covers, because I've been so kind of head based a lot of my life in terms of like understanding, I guess, sort of processes and psychological processes, unpicking or finding out more about, from occupational therapy assessments and things like that is just like so eye-opening. And in terms of like the hidden differences that can be going on that are still very physical. They're not to do with mental health. They are to do with the way that you're processing information. They are to do with like your muscle development. And those things can still turn into mental health issues, because when they're not recognised or they're not met, they can result in behaviours that have a child acting in a certain way, or masking it and feeling like I'm not as good as everyone else. But I just think fundamentally to have someone to process worries with, to, recognise emotions. I mean, how amazing would that be as well, and to support it, and also to just to work out how you're feeling and how you're navigating the day. I just think that's got to be a good thing, I think.
Yeah, well, we can dream about it and ask for it,
Yes,
and yeah, maybe it will happen.
Yeah.
Who knows? What has been the most challenging part of advocating for systems? So I guess we can use the attendance petition that you have, and yeah, how do you feel that the systems do not accommodate for neurodivergence? I think we touched base on it anyway.
Yeah, I think as well as the things that we've just mentioned, like, especially for children that are really beyond struggling in the classroom, but maybe they can't attend school anymore, maybe they're at home. And I think maybe some support, some sort of standardized support that's holistic for the family, and how to support the family in kind of going through that, because straight away you see, and it was definitely my experience and our family's experience, that it's quite lonely, because you're literally like plunged, because it's new to you, the situation is new, it's not new at scale, but to you and your household likely it's new, so you're just in this new situation, you just don't know what to do. And I just think it'd be really nice if there was some kind of consistent non-parent blaming, because as parents, I was definitely questioning myself anyway about what's going on and what am I doing and this, that, and the other. And then also, like, I think if those situations can take time to resolve, and then you can find yourself in systems that aren't really equipped for that. So even just simple things that I don't think anyone takes for granted, a dentist appointment at the moment, but actually trying to get a dentist appointment at home, or trying to get a blood test at home, to actually explain that, can that, a lot of the time you'll find that isn't actually available. So actually the healthcare that's provided is not kind of optimal, or not what every other child is kind of, or every child should sort of receive. And that's quite hard, because you find there's a bit of I find a bit of shame like cropping up, and I feel like I have to ask for that, but I feel like I shouldn't be asking for that. And
it should be given.
But it would be nice if there was some understanding that of those sort of, those edge case scenarios, because when you are living in the sort of edge case scenario, but the burden is on you, obviously, to explain, but it'd be nice if, like, there was a more, there was understanding of that from the person. So you're constantly having to explain and feel like the other person, it's the first time they've heard of that ever being needed, and that kind of thing.
And
So
there doesn't seem to be cross information between the different systems as well.
Yeah.
And then on the top of that, we have society in general. You were talking about parent blaming, and when you have like MPs or councillors, I don't know, I don't remember, it was a few months ago, or maybe even last year, that there was it the Warwickshire Council?
Yeah, I think there was something, wasn't
with their
there?
MP saying this is bad parenting, what's wrong with the silent numbers that keep increasing, and kind of blaming the parent. So that doesn't really help.
No, because you're already, like, being, a lot of parents, myself included, you're already being quite hard. You're already questioning every single life choice you ever made, and what have you ever done. And then to find that sort of, coming in at you from, the external, it actually doesn't help. That's the thing. Even if it was true, it doesn't actually help, because even if you are doing the wrong things, you actually still need support to know the right thing to do. So actually, where does it help anyone to be blamed in that situation? It's like, actually, everyone needs a solution. So yeah, greater sort of recognition of that, I think, for sure.
Yeah, very much needed. And you have some exciting news, because you are in the process of launching your non-for-profit company, which, by the way, I love the name. It will be named The Kindful.
Heard it here first. It's an exclusive.
Could you just tell us how did this happen?
Yes.
What led you here, and what is going the Kindful to be about?
Yes, yeah, definitely. Thank you for asking. It's something that I've been busy working away on for the last few months in terms of launching my own business. So as you said, it's called The Kindful, and I'll just speak a little bit about the name. So the Kindful's kind of got like 3 levels of meaning to it. So obviously there's like the obvious kind, which is in there around like kindness. But it's a little bit more than, like, even though kindness is everything in many ways, there's more to it than that as well. I really liked when I was looking at what the business is about and looking at how to name it, that looking at Kindful just kind of came to me. And then when I started looking at, it's actually a word, it's like a word that's sort of fallen into disuse, but the roots of the word kind were just really interesting to me, because actually the roots of the word kind that relate to our natural selves. So we say like humankind, and that kind of way. And we use the word kind all the time in that context. Or like, they're my kind of person, or something like that. And it's kind of there without really realizing it. And actually it relates to being your natural self. And I thought, oh, I love that, being your natural self, because that's what I'd like the Kindful education. I'll talk a little bit more about that, but that's what I'd like the Kindful to bring, is that you become more yourself, your natural self, and in touch with like yourself. So that was kind of like one layer. And then there was the layer of also kin and like family and people, and the people you're connected to. And that's in there as well. And also still connected within that same meaning. And I thought, well, again, the sort of my life and mindfulness and emotional regulation, it's not just been about me. It's not just been like this solo ship. It's been about my relationships with other people, with my family, and navigating the world. And we're connected to each other, and actually those connections, they're really important. Our family connections, but like we're saying, in difficult situation, our peers that understand it. And I was thinking, this is the Kindful is around yourself as a person, but it's also around like those you're in community and relationship with. And then there's like the sort of final meaning, the meaning that might jump out, which is that kindness. But actually, again, that the sort of original meaning of kindness, it relates to like natural acts of compassion, because that's your like natural nature, is to be compassionate. And I just loved that that's our natural nature, is to be compassionate. Which actually, when things go wrong, I think we do see that. Everyone says, look for the helpers in disasters, and you do, out they come to help. And I sort of, because I think kind can sometimes, it's like be one of those words that just becomes like a wallpaper word. I'll be kind.
Be kind.
Actually, it's got this, when you really look
there's
into
a lot
it,
more
there's a lot in it. And, and I just love that connection to compassion, because that's just such an important part of mindfulness. Because if you are simply just being aware, it's not, I think it might have been John Kabat-Zinn called, it's not a cold stare of awareness. You're not just like analysing yourself and going, don't do that. The compassion and the kindness is absolutely fundamental to bring that lens to your awareness as well. So that's a very long-winded way of me saying that the business is called the Kindful.
That's fantastic.
But and then what I'll be doing, so it'll just be me initially, but eventually I would like, it is a non-profit, a community interest company. So eventually I would like to work with other directors and have so it's not just me with all the voting rights and have like equal share. But to start off with, I just need to kind of get the Kindful kind of up and running. And what I'll really be launching with an offering is like, so like your kind of classic mindfulness-based cognitive therapy curriculums that have a lot of evidence for them, a lot of research behind them, and the 8-week courses, and also some 3-week courses and things like that. So kind of offering those into organisations, including adaptations to the workplace. So that's kind of one strand. And then there's also another strand is actually getting really specific about mindfulness, because I think sometimes mindfulness is quite a broad term and people might think, well, no, that's not for me.
Because people associate it with meditation and
it's
relaxation.
Meditation, or it's this, or I have to practice like this much or whatever. And actually, I think that what I'd really like to do with the Kindful is kind of offer, workshops around emotional regulation and what is emotional regulation, what are my signs for emotional regulation and dysregulation, So getting quite specific about some of the learnings that are in mindfulness, but just drawing them out and making kind of workshops around those specific points, if you like.
Yeah.
So yeah.
And when is the launch happening? Is it happening already?
I guess, I mean, I'm kind of, it's in a way I've launched there is a business. I'm delivering mindfulness sessions into the community via social prescribing locally, which I love. I love teaching the community. That's online and in person. Both are really valuable. People that wouldn't be able to come in person come online. And I've got more work lined up. I guess like the official launch will be when I launch my website properly and have my services up and running on there. But yeah, and that will be like March kind of officially. But yeah,
we're nearly there.
The doors are open on the shop, and and I just kind of wanted it to be a community interest company, so we can still make profit, but the profit goes back into the community that you're there to serve. And I'd also like to run more community groups and maybe set up a model for that could be kind of replicated in other areas that I'm not and things like that. So yeah, like building a bit of a community, because I think that kind of underpins. I like working alone, but I need to be linked into like community of people as well. So yeah.
No, that's fantastic, and it's good that you are offering the online options as well, because then you can reach people from Oxford, for example, like me, can join the workshops and the courses. And by the time this episode will be released, hopefully we'll have the website, and then I can put down the link for everyone to look at it. So
there you go. That gives me a deadline.
Yes.
Stop faffing around, get on with it, get it launched. So
yeah, great. Well, I wish you all the best of luck with it. And I look forward to see what's coming.
Thank you so much.
If you could change one thing about mental health, how mental health is approached today, what would that be?
Right. So what I would change is, and it's a little bit of a simplification. So I apologise if it's too much of a simplification. But one of the things that I feel about emotions and emotional recognition is that we've made emotions quite complicated in life, in our society, or they can be, and there's good reasons for that. We can have trauma, they can be overwhelming. That's very real. At their fundamental level, the kind of stripping them back to their core purpose, and emotion is just like biological signal and process that just happens in the body. And at a fundamental level, and again, massive simplification, so apologies for that. But at a fundamental level, it is just a signal that is saying, hello, I'm here, could do something with me or not, but I'm just flagging this up. And for whatever reason, I think we've lost a bit of that recognition and that understanding. There's some fear around emotions, and I've been guilty of it myself. Child falls over and it doesn't hurt. Actually, probably does hurt.
It does hurt.
It's yes, it hurts. Let me rub it better. Does that feel better? And you sort of validate the emotion. I think we could get a lot better at just dealing with emotions just as they are. And I'm not saying that, because actually biological processes do go wrong and they do overwhelm us, even ones like thirst. So it's not always that simple. And I know that. But wouldn't it be great as if there was just this general understanding? We have emotions and there's lots of them. Sometimes we don't even know, might not even get the right name for that emotion, but we know maybe we get a sense of what we need to meet that emotion. Because actually within there's probably a range of emotions for which that understanding would just help meet those emotions.
Mm-hmm.
And then we just carry on with our day, and just moving a little bit away from stiff upper lip and things like that, and just going, yeah, okay, that's there. Okay, what do I need? And it doesn't mean that you don't do the things. So if it was like anxiety or something, you might go, feeling a bit anxious, but I really want to do this. Okay, what's going to support me? And that's for me. So that's what I would change. I'd be like a lot more kind of factual about emotions and what they're there for, and and just able to meet them in kind of a.
Because very often we tend to bottle them up instead of dealing with them, and then the result is worse than what it should be.
Yeah, and they can, of course, there can be really good reasons for doing that. So I'm not undermining like trauma, and our bodies, our brains and bodies working in conjunction. Ultimately, they're trying to take care of us. So if there's something too traumatic, our cognitive process, our body process will do our best to keep us safe from processing that if it's not safe. So I'm more sort of talking about it at a kind of, I guess, non-clinically ill sort of level, where you're sort of more an education of like, oh, it's an emotion, that's what it's for, and it just does this. And then obviously still you need that specialized support for those big emotions that are going to, bring that overwhelm or disassociation. That still needs that support, and I'm not undermining that at all. Yeah. So yeah,
definitely. And what advice would you give to both neurodivergent people or parents who are struggling with emotional overwhelm?
Yeah, so yeah, advice, interesting. Yeah, that's an interesting one. I guess if someone's struggling with emotional overwhelm, I probably wouldn't be giving them too much advice because you're already kind of overwhelmed. But just generally, it would be take care of yourself, rest. I think there's a lot of guilt about rest in our society. And sometimes when I was in a period of burnout, which was in a summer, I think it was 3 or 4 years ago, I pretty much just rested. I actually had no choice. I had like nothing left. My resources were literally burned out. That's like the definition of burnout, isn't it? You don't have any resources left to draw on. And if you're sort of just, not just, but if you are feeling emotionally overwhelmed, it's suggesting that your bucket's already full. So maybe like pausing and just recognizing that it's too full, and then what you do next is really personal. So if you don't have strategies to cope with that, then maybe you do need to learn some strategies, also to get as someone to help you unpick that, empty that bucket a bit. Maybe if you recognize the emotional overwhelm, it's a case of resting or going for a walk or getting under a comfy blanket or writing a list, whatever. There isn't one set answer to that overwhelm. I mean, generally for me, a sign of overwhelm, when I start feeling overwhelmed, is generally that there's some underlying tiredness, or just because if I start getting overwhelmed and thinking I need to do that and I need actually now I do understand that is actually the sign, not to do more, but to do less and take a break. And it's almost like the overwhelm is kind of a signal of that. But yeah, generally I would probably start with the kindness to yourself, because I think with emotional overwhelm, if you don't bring that initial kindness, there's a danger you could just push yourself more into overwhelm, because the brain starts getting involved. Why can't I cope? Oh, I'm so rubbish, I can't even do this. And I think, no, let's pause that. Yes, you're going to do that, but actually just recognizing, hey, overwhelm's here. What's the kindest, most supportive thing I can do for myself, whatever that looks like.
I'm smiling because you are talking and I'm just seeing myself. And I have a lot to learn from you, for sure.
I'm still learning. That's what do they say about teachers? Like, you're teaching what you need to learn. So I'm still, I don't like teaching hierarchically. I am still learning. I'm still processing. And I just think it's a commonality, isn't it? And universal. You recognize it in if someone else is saying it and they're being hard on themselves, you think, oh, I do that too, but I can see them doing it and it's not the right thing to do because you're being so hard on yourself. And so again, it's that community learning is so helpful, I think.
Yeah, very much. How can the audience start incorporating mindfulness into their lives in a way that feels accessible and affirming?
I think that if the first of all is like a desire to do that, I think that's important. There's no, from, not feeling a sense of having to um, practice mindfulness. But if there was this curiosity to do that, then I think a really nice way. Obviously, I can, there's formal mindfulness teachers, and you could go and listen to John Kabat-Zinn or Mark Williams from Oxford, or Willem Kuyken, and so many good teachers. But if there was like something apart from sort of like learning and that sort of meditation apps and things like that, then a really simple thing you could do is like, actually I think exploring the pleasant sensations with your senses is a really nice initial introduction into kind of that mindful awareness. It's a really supported cushioning. So if, for example, it was a cold, we're in February at the moment, like a cold February night, and you've got I like to have a blanket because I like a blanket. And if you were like enjoying that sensation, you just notice that you're enjoying it, then you could bring your senses to that experience, and like maybe noticing the softness of the blanket or whatever it is. It could be a sunset with your eyes. And when you are using or bringing your senses to an experience, you're in the moment, because the senses are in the moment. They don't operate in the future and the past. It's the brain that kind of does that, and the thinking. So as soon as you're in that sort of sensory experience, that's a sort of form of mindful awareness, especially with that non-judgmental and the compassion and things like that. And that just could be a little doorway. And then obviously, if you were more interested in looking at mindfulness-based cognitive therapy, then you could look at like Headspace and a formal program, and those programs will start with like teaching you what attention is and how to direct attention. And then you sort of graduate from through these sort of courses, from sort of learning what that initial attention is, to moving it around your body, to exploring your limits, and a bit of movement. I'm moving my arms around because we have like mindful movement. And then as you get later into the course, it's about, okay, so we can direct our attention, we can come in, we can come out, we can decide whether to go into a sensation or come out. And then later in the courses, it's more about like, how do I respond to this? So how do I work with difficulty? So that's the more sort of formal sense. But we all have this capacity for attention. It's a natural skill that we have, or a natural muscle, if that's the right word, and it's there. So for me, it's about it's not something new. But in this world where just things and stimulus are coming at us all the time, it might be this experiential kind of way of using our senses might be something that just gets backgrounded, if that makes sense, because we're like living sort of automatically and reactively. So for me, it's just a case of going, you're not saying one's bad and one's good, but you're saying we've got these different modes available.
Yeah, it's about exploring as well, and be curious on what works best for you.
Yeah, and if you're like in a situation like, say I'm like driving, and a lot of driving might be automatic pilot, but if I start to get stressed, then maybe I can bring my awareness to that and go, I love labeling, sort of labeling that like, I'm feeling stressed because I'm running late. Sometimes that's just enough distance just to take you out of maybe like, road raging and things like that, into like, right, feeling stressed, what am I going to do? Okay, well, I'm going to phone ahead and say I'm running late or something like that. So yeah.
That sounds good. So besides practicing mindfulness, is there anything else you do that helps you with your well-being?
Yeah, loads of, such a personal, such a perfect personal preference sheet, isn't it? Of like, what, for me, there's lots of things. Like it could be, walking. I love walking. Getting out and just, walking helps me process, I think, especially if my brain's getting stuck looping around a particular problem. There's something about the act of walking that loosens that. But then other times it is me under a cozy blanket, just chilling out. And I like journaling as well to process. I find that really, really helpful. Sometimes I find that I have a lot of noise in my head, and actually sometimes just chucking it down on paper, no one's ever going to read it, just getting it out, I just can be like, oh, that's now gone out of my head. Yeah. So yeah.
Yeah, that's good. And who is your biggest inspiration?
Oh, yes. So I decided that my answer to this question was going to be, because I did think about, is it a particular person? And then I thought, actually, the kind of most inspired, or the most frequently I get inspired by people is generally people like in the community, or just unexpected, not big stages, but just in daily life, where like I was at this like awards ceremony for like my young people we sort of went to a few months ago, and one of the adults that had been nominated for an award, it was for offering meals on the to the people that needed them where she lived. And I just think things like that inspire me. There's no like, yeah, there's no big accolades or anything around them. They're just doing this stuff every day. And so it's stories like that, and people like that, or chatting to people and them telling you just things about their life, and you just think, oh, I like that way of thinking. That's really wise. And I like that inspires me on a daily basis. And I think I suppose more fundamentally, in terms of like the underlying inspiration and who I am, I guess it would be like, I would definitely look to, my mum. And, my mum's like, now she has like late stage Alzheimer's, and things are very different. But when I look back on my life and studying late in life, and who I am, and actually a lot of that has come, I think, from her, because she she trained to be a nurse from quite a young age, but then later on decided that she was going to be a midwife and had to study that was later on, and became really respected and well renowned in the area, midwife and things like that. And I guess kind of things that's kind of underlying. It's not something I think about all the time, but when I think about what drives me to want to carry on studying, and I think my dad as well, with his sort of PhD, like there was never like a time where you had to stop learning, and if that made sense, it was just you can learn at any point. So yeah.
That's indeed very, very inspiring. And Susan, if you were a superhero or had a superpower, who or what would that be?
Right, so I love this question. This is probably the worst answer I'm going to give, but I've decided that I would be the Hulk if I was a superhero. And the reason being is that I think the Hulk is a great so I've got an English literature background, I should say. So I love analysing characters and things like that. So I love the Hulk because the Hulk's obviously got these two very distinct personalities. He's got like the kind of analytical, in control kind of doctor, and then he's got the Hulk who's like smash and grab and stuff. And I can definitely, maybe I definitely wasn't as outwardly destructive as the Hulk, but I can definitely relate to that kind of that triggered like inner destructive and just kind of out of controlness. But actually, like within the Hulk as well, there's like, the Hulk is a superhero. He's not a villain. He still has this kindness in him. And his power is harnessed. Sometimes he has to be sort of poked into turning into the Hulk, but he'll move buildings and he'll move he'll rescue people, and that power is kind of harnessed. And I actually think, without sounds like I've thought about this way too much, maybe I have, but in sort of later films or more modern films with the Hulk, there have been scenes where like Bruce Banner is like meditating to keep the Hulk down, and that really made me smile. And then also there's been like scenes where I think like the Hulk's in the Hulk form, but he's got access to being like the calm scientist, so it's almost like he's integrated. And I actually really like that, because I don't think anyone should want to be a superhero. We all have sides and shadows, and actually I really like that the Hulk in that whatever film that was, I probably got it all wrong. There's probably Marvel fans going, you must remember that, but I really like this idea that you sort of integrate who you are. It's not about saying you're just now just a hero or you're now just one thing, but actually you can incorporate kind of that into who you are. And then sometimes you do need a bit of that force to move mountains or say, because for me, mindfulness it's not about passivity. It's not about acceptance of, in the sense of saying that this is okay, that you're being treated like that. It's very much not about that. Sometimes that clear seeing gives you a clear seeing that systems are harmful and systems don't have ethics built into them, and the stuff that systems are doing is wrong. And mindfulness can kind of help see that. And sometimes you need a bit of that kind of, I don't know if wholesome anger is the right phrase, or I suppose but you need a bit of.
But the anger can drive you as well, isn't it?
As long as it's healthily integrated,
yes,
so it's not
in constructive ways.
Burning out and ranting at people at parties. Sorry for anyone that I went through that phase, but it's literally about, hey, this is like this, and actually it could be like this, and that would be more effective. But you do need there's some force in that as well. So an integrated Hulk, that's what it would be.
Yeah, I love him. He's one of my favorites.
Green.
Well.
I mean, green's definitely the colour. I loved Wicked. Green's the colour. So yeah.
Yeah. And if you had the chance to go back in time and meet your younger self, what would you tell her?
Oh, I'd probably say, that's sort of bittersweet, isn't it? It is for me. I guess. So if I was going to go back, how old am I? That's like it can be any age.
Teenager, I would say. Yeah, or young adult between 18 and 20s.
Yeah. I'd probably just go back and give her a bit of a hug. Say, or maybe put that book in her hands a bit sooner. If I could go back and get her some support, some practical support, then I probably would actually, because I'll be you're going to struggle with your executive function at university, quite frankly. So there'll be this practical, but then there'll be also I'll just give a big hug and say it's just going to be okay, and you're going to learn from what you do, and just go easier on yourself, and maybe be a bit more sensible, but you know what, it will be okay in the end. Yeah.
It's the reassurance and validation. So
and I put some practical help as well. I'm a practical person. I've got to get that in there as well.
Yeah. And if your heart had a voice, what would it tell us?
I did have something in mind to say, and that's gone actually. So what I'll just sort of feel into what comes to mind, but
be kindful.
Be kindful. Have hope, and we need to work together to make some changes. The world feels pretty dark sometimes, but actually, as I mentioned earlier, there's that saying, look for the helpers. But actually I think it just have this sense that it's focusing on community. It's not necessarily about focusing on positivity and things like that. That's not specific enough for me, but there's something in people coming together, specific issues, and putting the right people around those things, and sort of, making them better, but just underpinned by this sense of taking care of ourselves and each other. That's a bit Jerry Springer.
With the right balance.
I'm gonna edit that bit out. But being kindful, taking care of ourselves, maybe just a little bit more support and care. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Susan. This has been an amazing conversation. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. Thank you to all of you for being on that side. I would also like to acknowledge Kay Workey and the Phoenix Picturehouse in Oxford for letting us record from here today. I'll see you soon. Bye.
Bye.